Thank you.
Stop on this 8-day adventure throughout the United States. Today we're in Salt Lake City. Before we get started and welcome all our speakers, I just want to mention that on June 8th, we'll be launching our third trip. Just to give you a heads up, some of the destinations: Chicago, Portland, St. Louis, just to name a few. So yeah, I just want to put that out there. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. So today, we are joined by Rabbi Samuel Spector, who is a rabbi at Congregation Kol Ami. We're also joined by Alex Shapiro, who is the Executive Director of the United Jewish Federation of Utah. We're joined by Jenny Teemsma, who is, she does interfaith relations for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we're also joined by Ken Adkins, who's a graduate of Claremont College, which is right by us in Los Angeles. And he focused on Mormon studies. And so if there's any questions, he'll be here to answer that. So with that said, Rabbi Spector, where are you? So I'm going to mute.
I'm in my house right now in there.
Ah, there you go, Rabbi. So I'm just going to mute everybody real quick.
Oh, you were asking where I literally am on your screen.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I see you there.
Yeah, I thought you were asking where in the world I am. I said I'm in Salt Lake City, but I thought you all knew that.
Just right there. So welcome. Thank you so much for saying yes. I know you have a lot going on, and thrilled that you are able to join us. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and open up, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'll start off by giving a little bit of background of how I got to Utah. I actually went to Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles, and then started my career as an assistant and then associate rabbi at Temple Judea in Tarzana. And when I told people after 3 years there, oh, Mario's about to knock on our door, just so you know, and I told people that I was leaving Los Angeles. Sorry, part of coming to Utah is you get dogs, and they hand you dogs right when you show up here. And so my dogs just bark because somebody's at my door. But when I told people I was leaving Los Angeles, they asked me, "Where are you going? Are you going to Chicago? Are you going to Washington, D.C.? Are you going to New York?" And I told them I'm going to Utah, and they all asked me the same question: "There are Jews in Utah?" And I kept telling them the same answer. I sure hope so, or else I've made a tremendous career mistake. And I have to say that coming out here has been a phenomenal, amazing experience as a rabbi. First of all, yes, there are Jews in Utah, and there have been Jews in Utah since the 1860s. I know Alex can talk more about that, as probably his family was one of those families, came out at least fairly early on. And we came out about the same time as the pioneers, the Mormon pioneers did. And actually the first person to be the liaison from the United States government to the state of Utah happened to be Jewish. And when we got here, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they have been probably the most persecuted religion in the history of the United States, at least in terms of relationships with our government. And whereas the church was rejected very early on by most Christian groups and seen as heretics by a lot of Christian groups, for Jews, for us, we were like, okay, it's just another group that isn't Jewish. We can all get along, and we've had wonderful relations since the beginning. And so to understand about my community, Congregation Kol Ami, you have to understand a little bit about the church, because Brigham Young gave us land for our first synagogue and also for our first cemetery, and as well let us use land in Temple Square to be. Let us use some land in Temple Square for our first high holidays. Gave us a room over in Temple Square, and so that's a little bit of that background. Being a rabbi in Utah is pretty awesome. Our congregation is called Kolami, which means all my people, because it was a Reform congregation and a conservative congregation, both founded around the 1890s, that merged together around 1970 to become one of the first dual affiliated communities. And what's so cool about being a rabbi here is, when I was in Los Angeles, I saw so many really wonderful rabbis, like Rabbi Paul Kipnis up in Calabasas, if you know him, or Rabbi Zach Shapiro in Culver City, who have communities where they get to know everybody in their community. There's maybe 300 families in their congregation. And then, of course, we have the Rabbi Wolpes and the, Rabbi Rossovs and people like that in Los Angeles, who get to meet with the mayor and are in the newspaper frequently and stuff like that. And here in Utah, I get the best of both worlds. Our congregation is about 400 families, so I get to know everybody, but at the same time, we're the largest synagogue in Utah, and I probably talk with the governor about once a month and get to really play a role in the state. But bigger than that, with the presence of the LDS Church here, I often say that the only rabbi in the world whose job compares to mine is the rabbi in Rome, because who else is in the headquarters of a major world religion? And that's pretty exciting. By the way, speaking of the governor, Utah was the second state to have a Jewish governor back in 1917. Simon Bamberger, one of our congregants, became the governor of Utah. And so it's a pretty neat experience. And also being, there are some things that are a little different. When I had some of my former congregants from Los Angeles come to visit me, I asked them, where do you want to meet? And they said, let's meet at the temple. So I drove downtown to the Mormon temple. And they called me and said, where are you? And I said, I'm at the temple. Where are you? And they said, we're at Congregation Kolami. And something I had to learn really quickly is there's one temple in town, and it's not mine. And so our vocabulary changes a bit. Another kind of neat thing, and I know Jenny can speak more to this, you have questions about Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is that they're a faith that has living prophets, and that the current president of the church, President Nelson, is 95 years old, and in the Latter-day Saints tradition, correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny, but God speaks directly to him, and he has revelations for what God wants for their people. And so here in Utah, where you go to communities that are 90-something% Latter-day Saints, and everybody in that community is of the same faith, and Jews make up 0.3% of the world, but about that same amount for the state of Utah, I think. A lot of people sort of think that you all are that your traditions are the same. And so when I told people I was the rabbi, people were so impressed, and they thought I was very young to be a prophet. And I had to explain, no, that's not how our tradition works. But my neighbors thought they were living next to the Jewish prophet for a while, which was kind of cool because their kids kept breaking my leaves for me until I told them otherwise. So a few kind of just last similarities I'll point out. Again, and Jenny can speak more to this, is what's really neat about being a rabbi here is that this place is called Zion, and it has America's Dead Sea, the Great Salt Lake, and for the Latter-day Saints, there's a holy temple in the holy city, the capital city, and the river that goes through our town is called the Jordan River. And so there you see a lot of kind of similarities between our tradition and and what you find here in Utah of this being the Latter-day Saints Zion, and that's a really cool experience as a rabbi, and I can't say enough great things about our relationship. Whenever I think Latter-day Saints feel a special kinship with Jews. We have a common narrative, just as we received revelation on Mount Sinai, and then crossed the Jordan River and crossed the Sea of Reeds to find our freedom from bondage and persecution. The Latter-day Saints experienced persecution in the Midwest and crossed the Mississippi and came to their promised land, and claimed to be descendants of the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. And so and had the revelation of the Book of Mormon. And so, you know, even though there are obviously some differences, that feeling of kinship has been really special. And whenever we've been in trouble, they've been there to help us, even though we don't see eye to eye on everything. And I'll give one example. About an hour and a half before Erev Rosh Hashanah services, our power went out. Every rabbi's kind of worst nightmare. A telephone pole down the street exploded, and the power to the whole neighborhood got knocked out. And I kind of blacked out for most of that hour and a half and don't remember a whole lot, because just imagine that Erev Rosh Hashanah and your synagogue all of a sudden has no power, and the power company says to you, "Don't worry, we'll get it on by 11 o'clock." And I start calling the church, and one of the churches Mormon churches down the street had power still, and they not only opened their building for us, they put people in our parking lot to direct them to how to get to their church, and moved our Sidurim over for us, our Machzors, and we had our Erev Rosh Hashanah inside of a Mormon church. And so that was really cool and kind of a testament to the amazing friendship that we have. How much time do I have? Is my time up? I don't want to take other people's time.
Maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
Cut me off whenever, Leah.
You're doing great, Sam. You should just use my time, because you've got the whole thing covered.
There you go. So yeah, what the last thing I kind of will say, I guess a difference between a couple differences between being in Los Angeles, since I spent 7 years of my life as a Jew in Los Angeles, versus here. We have, I think, 7 rabbis Mormons baptizing Jews, especially Shoah victims. So yeah, I'll take those questions. How much time do I have, Leah, for Q&A? So again, I don't want to steal other people's time.
So you have about 5 minutes for the Q&A.
Okay, cool. So there's a lot of work on genealogy here in Salt Lake City. That's a huge part of the Latter-day Saints tradition. And Jenny, again, could probably speak more to that than me. So there are a lot of people here who do some genealogical research. I don't know specifically how many. My wife is really into it. In terms of posthumous baptisms, I haven't really had that as a problem here. I know that was a major issue in the past and source of kind of discomfort between us and the LDS Church. Basically, but I'll say this, like, so what that is, in case you don't know, is that what Latter-day Saints can do is the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, that you might know, is a faith that proselytizes, that has missionaries that go throughout the world to teach about the Book of Mormon. And yet for a lot of people, since this is a fairly new religion, they never got to have the chance to convert to Mormonism, and so or to not convert to Mormonism. And so there's a practice of posthumously baptizing people, of taking names and baptizing those people posthumously. However, there was what the church says about that is that people are offered the opportunity to convert in afterlife, and they are welcome in afterlife to decline that offer. And I'm sure Jane can speak more of that than I can. And so, since that's the stance, the revelation that came out about that about a decade or so ago, last 20 years, then people haven't been quite as offended. When it comes to some people don't really care, they don't believe in it, and so it doesn't affect them. Other people find it fairly offensive. But when it comes to Holocaust victims, the church and the Jewish community came to an agreement that the church would not posthumously baptize victims of the Holocaust. And actually, the church employs several people who are monitoring that and seeing which names are entered in a database of posthumous baptisms. And if they see that somebody is doing Anne Frank or Elie Wiesel or something like that, they warn the person, you cannot do that. That goes against church teaching. And if they continue to do so, they can face ramifications such as excommunication. And also, let's see, I got asked, what about mixed marriages between Jews and Mormons? Is the proselytization a problem for Jews in Utah? I haven't really heard of it being a problem. I've actually never been proselytized. I think I'm on some do not call list or something as rabbi, I don't know. But nobody's ever knocked on my door. The thing is that I actually have a lot of Southern Baptists in my family. And the difference is that, and I'm speaking in general terms, when Southern Baptists have tried to convert me or proselytize to me, my experience has been, you're going to hell and there's a lot of judgment and you're blind to the truth and stuff like that. Here with the, what the missionaries are taught, and I've actually gone to the missionary train center here and met with the missionaries, is to be kind. And screaming at me and telling me I'm going to hell is not going to make me want to join your community. And so generally the experience that people have with proselytization is somebody might ask them, are you interested in learning about the Book of Mormon, or can I tell you about the church? And if you say, I'm not interested, no thank you, they say, okay, have a great day. And that's about the extent of it. In terms of mixed marriages, I mean, when you have such a low percentage of Jews, interfaith marriage is a really big thing here. Most of in my experience, most Latter-day Saints who are religious tend to marry other Latter-day Saints, and which there's a lot of, it's kind of like you don't see a whole lot of interfaith marriage in Israel between Jews and non-Jews, because 80% of the population is Jewish. They have a lot of access to other Latter-day Saints here. So most of the time when a Jewish person is marrying somebody who is of Latter-day Saint background, in my experience, it's been somebody who is secular, who has largely left the church.
Great. All right. So, Rabbi, that said, I want to go ahead and shift, and if we have time for more questions at the end, we'll certainly do that. But I wanted to, before I introduce our next guest, Jenny from LDS, I just wanted to share some imagery about LDS. So I'm going to go ahead and show that real quick. So please let me know if for some reason you do not see it. I'm on my phone again. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. 1 second. Okay, this should work. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes. I don't know if something's playing though. Now it's black.
No sound or visuals, Leah.
You can't see it?
No.
Okay.
Did you click the two little buttons before you shared? It says share music, share sound, and
I did. So I think I'm gonna stop sharing that. I'm so sorry. I've been having technical difficulties lately. So with that said, I'll share the video in the chat, but why don't we go ahead and start with you, Jenny? So I'll go ahead and unmute you. You there?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. And Rabbi Spector, I think you could just give the Latter-day Saint portion yourself. You did such a great job. So I don't know if there's much more for me to say. But I'm super grateful to talk to you guys today. And I also invited my friend Ken, who Leah mentioned earlier. He just graduated from Claremont in Mormon studies. So I thought he could help answer any, I guess, historical-based questions when we get to the Q&A. I am not a historian, but I do work for the church, like Leah mentioned, and I work in the Interfaith Relations Division of the church. So essentially, we work to develop relationships with leaders and members of other religions, and it's really, really fulfilling to learn about other faiths, and I absolutely love it. I'm originally from Sacramento, and I came to Utah to attend BYU and ended up staying. It's kind of, once you come here for school, a lot of people end up staying here in Salt Lake. So I'm a transplant, but I've really enjoyed Utah. So I grew up more of the minority in California. Like I was the only Mormon in my group of friends. And so it was a culture shock coming to Utah and being surrounded by so many Mormons, but it's been great. So Leah has asked that I just share a brief history about the church and a little bit about the church today. So I put together a little presentation. Let me just pull it up 1 second. Oh, Leah, can I get access to the screen sharing?
Absolutely. Here we go. Okay. Trying to figure out. There you go.
Okay.
It's not giving me the option to make you the co-host right now.
Okay. That's okay. I can just do it without it.
Sorry about that.
Okay, well, I'll just do it without the PowerPoint. It's totally fine. So I'm sure most of you have heard of Joseph Smith. He's a pivotal figure in the church's founding. And back in 1820, which was 200 years ago, so this is our bicentennial year, was the first vision, which helped to reinstate the church that we have today. And so just a little background of how that all happened. Joseph wasn't really sure what church he should join back in 1820. And in addition to, attending different churches and personal meditation, Joseph really searched for a relationship and a connection with God by studying the Bible. And one day he was reading James 1:5, and that says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. So he really felt like God was speaking to him in this verse, and it compelled him to pray and ask God what church to join. And that's when the first vision happened in what's called the Sacred Grove, which is just a grove of trees near his home. And Joseph was instructed to restore the church from Christ's time on earth. And so Joseph Smith is kind of known as a restorationist, where it's restoring or bringing things back.
Jenny,
so one other thing that...
You're co-host now.
Oh, okay. Let me try it.
Great.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So one other thing that I guess separates us from other churches like Christian faith is we believe in another set of scripture along with the Old and New Testaments. We believe the Book of Mormon is another testament of Jesus Christ. And so you've probably heard of the Broadway show, The Book of Mormon. No affiliation. In fact, we believe the book is better. But so I'm sure you've been familiar of hearing of the Book of Mormon. So over the years, the saints were forced to flee. Rabbi Spector mentioned this earlier, but of anti-Mormon hostility, which they faced in New York, Ohio, and Missouri, and they eventually went to Nauvoo, Illinois, and that's where Joseph Smith ended up being martyred by a mob in 1844. So after Joseph Smith was killed, the next prophet was Brigham Young, and he led the saints to Utah in 1847, and they were seeking religious refuge. And we all kind of wish they went a little further west to California. That'd be nice. But Utah ended up becoming the 45th state in 1896. Just a few facts and statistics about the church. First, this photo is of Temple Square, which Rabbi Spector spoke about earlier. And you can see the temple and the church office building, which is our headquarters. And since 1996, there have actually been more members of our church outside of the US than in it. And we're approaching 17 million members. Before coronavirus, there were 67,000 missionaries worldwide and 167 temples. And then one of the things we believe a lot in is following Christ's example of service and caring for the poor and needy to whoever needs it. And so since 1985, 142 countries have received humanitarian aid from the church. One also, I guess, interesting fact is Salt Lake City's population is actually the minority is Latter-day Saint. So I think it's like 49% is Latter-day Saint now, and the majority is not members of the church. This was already covered by Rabbi Spector. So yeah, the 4th governor of Utah was Jewish, and then the first Jewish cemetery was donated, the land was donated by Brigham Young. Today, we are able to continue to interact heavily with the Jewish community in Utah and worldwide. But here in Utah, I've had the privilege to participate in a Jewish and Latter-day Saint dialogue, and it's been so much fun. I'm sure Alex will speak about this later, but this last one, we weren't able to meet, so we did it over Zoom. And we meet, I guess, maybe like 6 months a year. It just depends. We take some of the summer months off, but we take turns hosting these dialogues, and we learn more about each other's faiths and are able to ask questions, and it's been really fulfilling. So this is the Salt Lake Temple that is pictured here. And I just want to talk about maybe some similarities you can see with our temple practices. So a temple for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has some similarities with practices established in the Old Testament and the Hebrew scriptures. So those similarities include elements of the tabernacle that Moses established and the Levite priests administered with the children of Israel as they wandered through the wilderness. With the construction of more permanent temples, such as the Temple of Solomon, demonstrations of commitments and covenants were made by those who worshiped. So today, as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we likewise make commitments and covenants in our modern day temples. And one of the most sacred covenants we make in the temple is to use our talents and means that God has blessed us with to bless our fellow man and to make the world a better place. And I know I'm not going to know how to pronounce this, but I know it's similar to the notion of tikkun olam. You can correct me, but to repair the world. And I think
Tikkun olam. Very close.
There we go. Yes. So to repair the world and just making sure that you are bettering your community and the world around you. So this was also mentioned, but some of our other values is remembrance and family, and the family connection and connection to our ancestors is really important to the church. And pictured here is the family history library, which is, I think, the largest genealogical library in the world. And we can find information about our ancestors and do family history research. And then another important thing to us is the Sabbath, which for us is on Sunday. And we just try and spend time with our family, go to church, and focus on things that bring us closer to Christ. And with that, can do a Q&A.
So I see one of the questions is, can you discuss the use of the term Gentile to the LDS Church? I believe that they call other Christian denominations Gentiles, but not Jews.
Yeah. Ken, do you want to help me with this one?
Yeah, definitely. My name's Ken Adkins. I'm here in LA County, Claremont. Native son of Southern California from San Diego. So the term Gentile is more of a term that was used in the early days of the church. As Rabbi Spector noted that ideas of biblical lineage were very popular in American religion at this time, and Latter-day Saints were no exception. They felt that many of them were direct descendants of the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. And so they kind of, they took the Hebrew, in many ways, you could say, inserted themselves into the biblical narrative and into the children of Israel. So for some time, and I would say that this probably existed till maybe even the middle of the 20th century, Mormons in Utah would describe others outside of Utah, non-Mormons, as Gentiles. But that's something that's faded with time, and it's no longer used, in the everyday vernacular of a Latter-day Saint.
Great. So another question is, given that Christians embrace Jesus, how does Mormonism differ from other major Christian religions? For example, do Mormons believe Jesus as the Son of God?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and he is the center, Jesus Christ is the center of our faith. I think a lot of people don't understand that. But I guess the biggest things that do separate us is first the Book of Mormon, which I mentioned earlier. And then also Rabbi Spector spoke about this, but we believe in living prophets and that we have a prophet on the earth today. And so our current prophet is President Nelson. So I'd say those are major things that separate us. Ken, do you want to add anything or?
No.
Okay.
So this is an important one. Is there shopping on Sundays? Are stores open?
Yes, there are things open on Sundays. I will say though, Salt Lake City, there are definitely more things open. Down in Provo, which is where BYU is, a lot more things are closed. So I think it just depends on where you live in the state with how many things are opened. So
Gotcha.
Traditionally, Latter-day Saints do not shop on the Sabbath.
Right.
Gotcha. So, and this is a great question too. How is it decided where the missionaries go for their pilgrimages?
Oh, Alex, we had a dialogue about this. Do you remember? So basically when someone, you do remember, cool.
I think I
So when so men can go on a mission at 18 and women at 19. And so when they decide that they would like to serve a mission, it's voluntary, by the way, you don't have to do it and you're not paid to do it. You fill out some paperwork and have to, go through a series of interviews, questions, and you submit it all to church headquarters. And then from there, we have what we call the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, similar to Christ's time, the 12 apostles. So they actually go through each person's application and decide where they will go.
Are adults allowed to drink alcohol, sacramental wine?
No alcohol. So we have what's called the Word of Wisdom, which is kind of like a dietary, I guess. It's not kosher, but it's a dietary thing we follow. And so no alcohol, no tobacco, no drugs, no coffee. So we follow the Word of Wisdom.
Okay. How are missionaries trained? Do you have professionally trained leadership like we have rabbis trained in seminaries? So how are they trained, and do you have professionally trained leadership like rabbis are trained in seminaries? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's not as intense as rabbinical school. So it depends also where they're going, how long their training is, depending on the difficulty of the language. And it's even changed over the years, but we have different missionary training centers around the world. The largest is in Provo, which Rabbi Spector mentioned earlier he got to go and see. But the missionaries received training there on language, as well as just going over, I guess, how to teach more about the church. And Ken served a mission, so if he wanted to talk more about his experience, he could.
I did. I was a Southern California boy sent to Tennessee, which was very unfamiliar to me. Unlike a rabbi, missionaries are usually young men and young women who are volunteering for about 24 months. As really culturally, it seemed to be a rite of passage. In our tradition, it's a time where you go out and you share, you try to make the world a better place, you share what you believe, and you learn valuable life skills as well. And that's something that I value about my mission. There were a lot of different types of mainly Protestant Christian groups in Tennessee. And so to engage with them and to participate in their culture, it's not like some missionaries from our church going to Brazil or or to Japan. Not quite the same, but a learning experience nonetheless.
And if you could also maybe speak to bishops and stuff, and because I think that's a major difference, and people were shocked to find out that rabbi was a full-time job too, and how somebody becomes a bishop in church or whatever.
Yeah, so in our church, we have what we call callings, which is basically just like how you volunteer in your congregation. And we believe in lay leadership. And so it's all volunteered. You're not paid for any of, I guess, the callings that you do. So a bishop, which is over a congregation of about 500, it's not their full-time job. It's just a volunteer thing that they do to participate in church. And so they help oversee the whole congregation.
So one more question, and then we're going to turn to, we'll turn to Alex. Are marriages arranged by the church? And then also, does the church pay living expenses for missionaries? So are marriages arranged, and then do they pay living expenses for missionaries?
No,
Okay.
thank God they're not arranged by the church.
Yeah, they are not arranged. Like Ken said, thank goodness. So yeah, no, it's just like dating regularly. You get to have a say in who you end up with. I met my husband here in Utah, but he's from San Diego. And yeah, we just got to have a say in it. So yeah, no arranged marriages.
And then the second one was, does the church pay living expenses for missionaries?
The missionaries are asked to contribute a certain amount. Many of these young men and young women save for their time as missionaries, and then that gets sent to Salt Lake, and then those funds are then distributed internationally by need. So often you'll have someone from, let's say, the Democratic Republic of Congo who's serving a mission in Paris. Obviously, the economic circumstances of that missionary will most likely living in Paris for 2 years would be very much outside of the, that normal economic ability of that missionary. So missionaries in the United States, or missionaries where the economic resources of the members of the church are greater, might be asked to contribute more to balance out what is required for those missionaries to be supported for a full 24 months.
Okay. All right, so just one more question, and then that really is it. Leonard and Rebecca.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I have a aunt and uncle who moved to Salt Lake City. They're both Jewish, moved to Salt Lake City back in the 30s. And he was a professor, researcher at the university there at the medical school. In fact, there's a building at the medical school, University of Utah, that's named after him. His daughter, still, my first cousin, she still lives there. Her first husband was Jewish, but she has 4 sons, and I believe all of them intermarried. But my question is a little different. I know that at least once upon a time, Mormons went out and they established new communities in the West. I believe San Bernardino was founded by Mormons. I think Las Vegas was founded by Mormons. I know there was a Mormon battalion in San Diego. I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that history and what happened to that part of your philosophy.
Yeah, this is the perfect question for Ken, but I do think it's a little ironic that Las Vegas was founded by Mormons.
I think we would all agree. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so when I think one thing that that's noteworthy, and Rabbi Spector mentioned this a little bit, when Brigham Young brought the saints into the West, really what he was trying to establish as a place of refuge for the religious community. And they were intentionally leaving the boundaries of the United States into what was Mexican territory in 1847. Now that changed very quickly after the end of the Mexican-American War. But that was the original intent, to really to leave the United States. So the original proposed boundaries for what was called the state of Deseret originally included, from Salt Lake City and the surrounding area, incorporated Nevada, all of Los Angeles and San Diego, a big portion of the West. That wasn't approved by the United States as a state or as a territory. And so we get the boundaries that we have now after several revisions, and then into statehood in just before the 20th century. So the idea was, at the time, the church had a number of converts, a lot of success in England, in Scandinavian countries, and there was a lot of immigration to Utah. And Brigham Young wanted to establish as many communities for those saints as possible.
So before we turn to Alex, I just want to thank you for, in sort of last minute, agreeing to come speak with us. Temple Beth Am really values interfaith relations, and we have not partnered with the Mormon Church, with LDS yet. From what I understand, you're not called Mormon anymore. Am I correct?
So the official name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And Mormon, I guess in the beginning, was more of a cultural and nickname for the church. And our prophet has recently wanted to put more of an emphasis on the name of the church in its entirety, simply because a lot of people are confused and don't think that we're Christian. But even though Jesus Christ is in the name of our church, so that's the reasoning. But it's okay if you still call us Mormon.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. And with that said, why don't we, Alex, will you take us home?
I will try. Hi, everybody. Number one, Leah, thanks so much for reaching out. Sam, thanks, Rabbi Sam, thanks for throwing my name out there. And number two, I don't know how I could possibly follow Jenny and Rabbi Sam, who really have, wonderfully shared so much about this great place where we live. And it also warms my heart that you have so many questions for Jenny and Ken about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and who they are and what makes them and how it affects this place where we live. Listen, I'm just a regular guy, unlike Rabbi Sam, who had no choice of how he ended up in Salt Lake City. I was just dropped right out of my mother's womb on Valentine's Day a long time ago. When people ask me about how long I've been here, my answer is the same to everyone. I have twin boys who are 24, and those two guys are fourth-generation Jewish Utahns. So when we talk multi-generations around these parts, it's usually not us guys who fall into that category. So growing up here and being a part of the culture and community, being one of only, 2 or 3, 4 Jewish kids in my school, growing up, as Rabbi Sam alluded to, is exactly the life I led. Today, people will ask the questions that some of you have asked. How is it living here? Do you feel like you'll be converted? Is it hard to make friends? Listen, growing up, if I didn't have Mormon friends, I wouldn't have had any friends. And I grew up in a strong, connected Jewish family with a heavy connection to identity. And it was very comfortable for my brothers and I to run down the street and open up Christmas presents with our Mormon friends as it was for them to run up and open Hanukkah presents with us. I don't think I was prepared to handle all the what does it mean to be Jewish questions growing up as a kid, certainly not as well as my boys did during their time. But that was the case, right? It was up to us or our parents at the time to really describe for the classes of all ages, what it meant to be a Jew in Utah. My family did come here a long time ago. In fact, my grandfather pushed Brigham Young's wagon when the back left tire fell off. He and 4 other guys had to carry that left side and push it for the last 125 miles. Is nobody smiling? I'm just making this up as I go along. That's not true. That said, my family came here right after the turn of the 1900s. My grandfather came as a 9 or 10-year-old through Eastern Europe into the East Coast, and both grandfathers did the same. Both my grandfathers were Eastern European immigrants. Surprisingly, both my grandmothers were born in the United States. And for different reasons, they both ended up in Utah. We had a family retail business here for almost 100 years that started way back in 1917, and from which my brothers and I exited just at the end of 2008 when the world was upside down. But that business and our family were intertwined with this broad community for all those years. And the values that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints bring to this area are strong values, their family values, their community values, and it, really made for, a great life growing up, and certainly a business life that provided for almost 4 generations of Shapiros. Along the way, I grew up as a latchkey kid because my parents and grandparents were always doing Jewish here, right? And came from a real communal family with a big volunteer bent to it. And so I don't know how it happened, but not too long after selling our business, somehow I ended up behind the chair of the Jewish Federation of Utah. So I went from a vested volunteer to the dark side of Jewish communal life, which is really the bright side. Of course, deciding to work for the Jewish Federation, I had one big worry. That was what would happen to my friends. They see me coming, they're going to run to the other side of the street, so, but it's all worked out. That's been good. And that was over 10 years ago. Let me just talk about the broad community a little bit and give you plenty of time. I just want to see if there's anything I want to reach back to from what Jenny and Rabbi Sam talked about. Rabbi Sam talked about the Jewish community really began here in 1860s, along with the arrival of Brigham Young and the followers. We were a merchant class, early, lots of retailers and all kinds of categories. And, those are really all gone today, as with the trajectory of a lot of retail, but again, intertwined in community. We had 2 main congregations way back in the day from the early days of the 1900s. And I'll say, as I'm thinking about this, our first I've lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. But these two synagogues, I'm a product of a mixed marriage. My father was at the Reformed temple, and my mother grew up inside of the conservative temple. These two buildings were only a block and a half apart, and I would run between the two on the high holidays, especially on Yom Kippur, stopping for a hot dog at the little burger joint that laid perfectly in between, and of course not telling anybody about that. I happen to be the first, I don't know if Rabbi knows this, but I happen to be the first bar mitzvah of the merged congregations in 1973. So I just told you how old I am. And the communities continued to grow. The Salt Lake, Provo metro areas are always one of the fastest growing areas in the country. Every year, people are moving in from all over for education, for technology, for medicine, for lifestyle. You've heard of Silicon Valley, up the street north of where you all are. Well, we have Silicon Slopes here. We have 120 plus tech companies that run the corridor of I-15, and companies find it very advantageous to start here or move here. We have a young workforce, we have an educated workforce, and we have a very multilingual workforce here. And along with the growth of our broad community has been the growth of our Jewish community. Congregation Kol Ami and its predecessors is where I grew up, and it's where my family pictures are on the wall, and it's where all kinds of connections to my family exist. We have a wonderful congregation in Park City named Temple Har Shalom, called Temple Har Shalom, with plus or minus 300 full and part-time members up there. They run a full religious school and services throughout the year. The community is full of immigrants, I call them, from all over the country, East Coast, West Coast, full-time, part-time. So many of them start part-time and end up full-time. It's just a wonderful place to ultimately retire to. And with that growth of the community, we have many vibrant agencies. We have a full Jewish family service that serves not only the Jewish community, but the broad community, with a number of therapists, social workers, etc., with a food bank that's really so respected in the broad community. We have a JCC that sits inside of a 5-acre campus with inside of a 100,000 square foot building with about 200 membership units, of which maybe 20% are Jewish. So it's really a place where no matter who you are, all can feel welcome. And it's a place, it's a place in kind of a strange way that in not such a diverse community provides a sense of diversity in our community. Parents will come with their kids in early childhood, which has about the same percentage of Jewish, non-Jewish families, and stay there for life. It's really a wonderful place. We've got a day school that's an interesting twist on a Jewish day school, probably not as you would think, but one that combines the values and beliefs and many traditions of Judaism with a broad multi-faith population. It's really a wonderful place. And we have synagogue north in Ogden, 30 miles. We have a synagogue and a Chabad in southern Utah, which is about 4 hours away, around St. George. We have a Chabad in Salt Lake, a Chabad in Park City, another congregation that shares the building with Rabbi Sam, Chavara Biachad, a Reconstructionist group. So really, there is Jewish life in Utah, in Salt Lake. We're vibrant, we're over-programmed, it's easy to be connected, and it's a great place to be. It's a great place to raise a family. We're very lucky that we ended up with our prophet, Rabbi Sam, here. I think that he could certainly, at least by his neighbors, and I'm sure most of his congregants be considered as such. And listen, I'll come over when your neighbors find out the truth. I'll come help with your leaves in the fall if that's going to be a problem. But I think that's a broad overview
Right.
of who we are. We're really a wonderful, connected community with a lot to offer. So I'm happy to answer questions or have you all fall back to Jenny or Rabbi Sam as well.
Thank you, Alex. And so if anybody heads out to Salt Lake City, are they welcome to contact you so that they have a fellow Jew in Zion?
Oh, they are welcome to contact me. I mean, some of the favorite calls I get, somebody will be moving here from, another end of the country, and they'll call me up and I'm saying, moving from Chicago, and I need to find a realtor, and can you tell me where the Jewish neighborhoods are? Right? We don't have really Jewish neighborhoods here. And, but yes, they are welcome to contact any of us, including Jenny, who knows as much as we do. And listen, let me just touch on the relationship with the LDS Church. It's wonderful. Rabbi Sam alluded to it. Jenny talked about it. And we're connected as communities. We've had this wonderful dialogue that's been going on 9+ years, where we come together to certainly not with any desire to change one another's mind, but with a hope and a belief that we can come to understand each other better, that we can ask easy questions and difficult questions, and that we can find ways to collaborate with each other, and most importantly, to build friendships and relationships. And I can tell you, over 9+ years of doing this, it's really one of the sweetest things I do all year long. So.
Well, it really sounds like you guys out there are really wonderful examples of bridge building and collaboration. And so thank you for highlighting that for us. So there's a couple of questions, and Jenny and Ken, feel free to chime in on this. Can you speak on the role of women in the LDS Church, both religiously and in the church's leadership hierarchy?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So women do have leadership roles within the church. I guess the biggest thing is we don't have what we call the priesthood. Women do not receive the priesthood, only men do. And prophets are men with the priesthood. But women are very heavily involved in leadership within the church. And we have something that's called the Relief Society, which is actually the largest and oldest women's organization worldwide. And it's made up of all women in our church 18 and older. And the purpose of the Relief Society is to basically serve and help the community around us. And I know, as my experience as a woman in the church, I've always felt like I have a voice and a say, and I've been looked to help within my congregation. And yeah, I think that the church really values women and women's roles, and just making sure that they feel heard and understood. So yeah.
Wonderful. I actually want to conclude, hear from Lorraine, who has a significant history in Salt Lake City. So if you'll just share that. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay. Okay, do you have the news? So anyway, I'm Lorraine Siegel-Koken, Alex Shapiro. I don't know if your mother was Vivian or not, but I was born and raised in Salt Lake City.
Yes, my mother was Vivian.
Yes, I knew Vivian. And do you know my brother, Roger?
By what last name?
Roger Siegel.
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
That's my wife laughing in the background.
Well, anyway,
Let me just tell you, Roger was my advisor in AZA, and that's how far back it was. And that's how old I am, and that's how we're, anyway.
Well, anyway, I was born and raised in Salt Lake, and so was my mother. And she was one of 4 children. And my grandfather came at the turn of the century, at about 1901.
1901, he got off the train heading to San Francisco, and he had a few hours to spend, and he walked around downtown Salt Lake City, and he was sort of like Brigham Young, and he said, I think this is the place. And so he just stayed there. And he lived there another 77 years. He died at age 100.
And I don't know if Leah, you can put up the newspaper article I sent you. But in 1975, he was given the honor. Oh, I maybe have it here too. But in 1975, I don't know if Alex, you remember, and Sam, you weren't there yet, but he was given the honor as being the oldest Jewish person to dig the put the shovel in and turn the first dirt for the new building for Congregation Kol Ami. And Alan and I were married in Salt Lake in
1973, in case you don't remember.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Tell me, who was it that put the first shovel in the ground?
Herman Finkelstein.
Oh, yeah,
my grandfather, who had a furniture store, Western Furniture.
Yeah, I remember.
We all loved working there when we were young. I was
my mother
was one of 4 children, and there were 12 cousins. And so, but I graduated from the University of Utah, and unfortunately I felt that I needed more contact with the Jewish world. And so I left and I came to
Well, that still happens around here, believe me. There's
still
still plenty that are following you.
That's right. Roger, my brother, stayed, and my cousin moved from Idaho and came to Salt Lake and has stayed there. But a lot of the cousins, we left.
And she found a Brooklyn Jew in Los Angeles.
Nice.
Oh,
that's so great.
Rabbi, her cousin also is Bruce Coney. And 2 years ago, we were in Salt Lake for the Bar Mitzvah.
And we met Sam.
And we said hello to you because we have friends.
Yeah, he's our community patriarch.
Right.
Okay. And one of the things
everybody's a cousin of Bruce. Alex and Bruce are related to everyone.
Yeah. So when we were married in 1973 in September, we may have been the first Jewish wedding of Kol Ami, because we had the Ufruf at Montefiore, and
oh wow,
and we had the wedding the next day at Bnei Israel.
That's so interesting.
Before it became a restaurant.
Yeah, before it became a restaurant. And then shortly after that, in 75, we turned the dirt for the new congregation.
One thing about Herman, I don't know when he did this, in the 20s or 30s, but Montefiore used to be Orthodox, but they had a mechitza. And the men and the women sat separate. And all of a sudden he decided, I want my wife sitting next to me. And so he had her sit next to him. And that sort of ended that mechitza. And then from then on, everyone sat together. But he was a wonderful, wonderful man. And he had a great life. And it was a privilege to know him.
And actually, I loved Salt Lake. It's a beautiful, I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but it's absolutely a gorgeous city, nestled among in a valley of mountains, and wonderful 4 seasons, which you don't really get in sunny California. And of course, if you love outdoor life, it's fabulous.
And you know, one thing, if you're a Jew and you ski, the 2 best days to ski are Christmas and Easter.
That's perfect.
Well,
thank you.
Thanks
you
so much for sharing that story.
Oh, okay. I don't think we can see it. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But
I just happened to be going through some papers, and there was this photo of my grandfather when he was turning the soil. So, but the only other thing I'll say is, growing up like Alex, I had a lot of friends. A lot of Mormon friends. I was very, very close. We were all very good friends, and other friends, other denominations as well. And it was a great place to grow up. It really is a beautiful place. So I'm happy the Jewish community is alive and well.
yes. Yes, thank you so much. I love concluding with the personal, so thank you for that.
I have one other question though. I want to ask Leonard, who's your relative?
Oh, hold on, we gotta unmute you.
Because maybe you know this person, Alex and Sam.
Well, my uncle was Maxwell Wintrobe, but his daughter married a Brown, so the ones that are left are all Browns.
Was he a hematologist?
He was a hematologist. He kind of invented the field.
That's right. He was a very, very famous doctor at the University of Utah. And actually, I think his son went to read Hebrew school with me.
Yeah, his son died young. I forget exactly what happened to him.
I believe he was in a car accident. Yeah. Yeah. But he's a very famous.
Yeah, his daughter's now in her 80s. Susan. I don't know. Yeah, Brown, I guess.
Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, I know a few.
Great. Well, thank you to everybody. Thank you to Alex, to Rabbi Spector, to Jenny, to Ken. This was wonderful. And I want to thank all of you on this call for joining me on this journey. I've seen a lot of you keep showing up, and that thrills me. And I hope I get to see you June 8th when we launch our 3rd virtual tour. So with that said, thank you everybody for being on this adventure. And I hope to see you at the next one. So everybody have a good night. And I hope to see you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you. Great.
Leave it.
Thank you, Leah.
Leave it.
Leave the message.
Is it too late to ask Ken a question?
If he doesn't mind.
No, I don't mind at all.
What are the books behind you?
Oh, this is actually just a virtual background. They're not real. It's all mirage. Otherwise, you would be looking at my messy bedroom.
Okay. Well, I was impressed with all of your antiquities.
All right. All right, everybody. I'm going to close shop. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah.